There are two men who saved the Oakland Raiders from being forgotten. Not owners, not coaches, not defensive legends whose hits are still replayed 40 years later. Two quarterbacks, both rejected by the league, both written off as failures, both resurrected in Oakland and given one final chance to prove everyone wrong. And both delivered championships that cemented the Raiders as one of the most dominant dynasties in professional football history. Tonight, I'm going to tell you the complete story of Ken Stabler and Jim Plunkett, the two quarterbacks who led the Raiders to 3 Super Bowl victories, the two men who represent everything the silver and black stands for. But this is not just a story about winning championships. This is a story about redemption, about second chances, about what happens when a franchise refuses to give up on players that everyone else has discarded. By the end of this video, you will understand why these two quarterbacks are the heart and soul of Raiders history, and why their stories matter far beyond football. Let me start with the man who came first, the rebel who made the Raiders relevant. Ken Stabler was born on Christmas Day, 1945 in Foley, Alabama, a small town where football was religion and Friday nights belonged to high school games played under dim lights. Stabler was a natural athlete. He played quarterback with an instinct that coaches could not teach. He saw the field differently than other players. He made throws that should not work but somehow did. The University of Alabama offered him a scholarship. He played for legendary coach Bear Bryant from 1965 to 1967. In his senior season, Stabler led Alabama to an undefeated record and a national championship. The Oakland Raiders selected him in the second round of the 1968 NFL Draft, 52nd overall. A talented quarterback from a winning program joining a franchise that was building something special. But success did not come immediately. Stabler spent his first 2 seasons as a backup. He watched Darryl LaMonica, the Raiders' starting quarterback, lead the team to the AFL Championship in 1968 and another championship game appearance in 1969. By 1970, Stabler was restless. He wanted to play. He wanted to prove he belonged. But LaMonica was still the starter and still productive. Stabler made poor decisions off the field. He partied too much. He missed meetings. He frustrated coaches who saw his potential but questioned his commitment. In 1971, the Raiders suspended Stabler for the entire season for conduct detrimental to the team. 26 years old, his career in jeopardy. Most organizations would have given up on him. Al Davis did not give up. The Raiders reinstated Stabler for the 1972 season. He continued as LaMonica's backup, appearing in games but not starting. He was learning, maturing, waiting for his opportunity. That opportunity came in 1973. LaMonica suffered a shoulder injury early in the season. Stabler took over as the starter in Week 5, and he never gave the job back. From 1973 to 1979, Ken Stabler was one of the best quarterbacks in professional football. He led the Raiders to 5 consecutive AFC championship games from 1973 to 1977, but the championship kept eluding him. The Raiders lost heartbreaking playoff games. They lost to the Steelers multiple times in the AFC championship. They could not break through to the Super Bowl. Until January 9th, 1977, Super Bowl XI, Rose Bowl, Pasadena, California. Oakland Raiders versus Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings were appearing in their 4th Super Bowl in 8 years. They had lost all 3 previous appearances. They were desperate for a championship. The Raiders were equally desperate. They had been the best team in the AFC for years but had nothing to show for it. This was their chance to prove they belonged among the NFL's elite franchises. Ken Stabler took the field knowing this might be his only opportunity. He was 31 years old. Quarterbacks did not get unlimited chances at championships. This moment mattered more than any other in his career. The game was not close. The Raiders dominated from the opening kickoff. Their defense harassed Vikings quarterback Fran Tarkenton all game. Their running game controlled the clock, and Ken Stabler managed the offense with the calm precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Stabler completed 12 of 19 passes for 137 yards and 1 touchdown. The statistics were not spectacular, but they did not need to be. He did not force throws. He did not make mistakes. He simply executed the game plan perfectly. Final score, Oakland 32, Minnesota 14. The Raiders were Super Bowl champions. Ken Stabler had his ring. The quarterback who had been suspended 6 years earlier was now a champion. After the game, Stabler was asked about the journey that led to this moment, about the suspension, about the years of playoff losses, about the doubters who said he would never win the big game. He smiled that famous Ken Stabler smile and said, "We just win, baby." 3 words that would become the Raiders' unofficial motto. 3 words that captured everything about how Stabler played football: confident, unapologetic, focused only on results. Ken Stabler continued playing for the Raiders through the 1979 season. He made 4 Pro Bowls. He was named NFL MVP in 1974. He led the league in passing touchdown percentage and passer rating in different seasons. But he never returned to another Super Bowl. The dynasty he helped build eventually moved on without him. In 1980, the Raiders traded Stabler to the Houston Oilers. He played 2 seasons in Houston, then 1 final season with the New Orleans Saints before retiring in 1984. Ken Stabler was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2015. He died 1 year later from colon cancer at age 69. His legacy is complicated. He was brilliant on the field and chaotic off it. He won a championship, but never quite escaped the party boy reputation that defined his early career. But to Raiders fans, Ken Stabler will always be the Snake, the left-handed quarterback who brought the franchise its first Super Bowl title, the player who proved that second chances matter. Now let me tell you about the quarterback who saved the Raiders twice. Jim Plunkett was born on December 5, 1947, in San Jose, California. He was raised by parents who were both legally blind. His father worked odd jobs to support the family. His mother sold newspapers on street corners. Plunkett grew up understanding that nothing would be given to him, that success required work that most people were not willing to do, that being underestimated was an advantage if you were willing to prove people wrong. He starred at Stanford University, winning the Heisman Trophy in 1970. He was the most accomplished college quarterback in America. The New England Patriots selected him first overall in the 1971 NFL Draft. Plunkett spent 5 seasons in New England. The Patriots were a bad team with a terrible offensive line and minimal talent at skill positions. Plunkett took a beating physically. He threw interceptions because he was constantly under pressure and forced to make plays that were not there. In 1976, New England traded Plunkett to the San Francisco 49ers. He spent 2 miserable seasons in San Francisco as a backup. By 1978, he was out of football entirely. Jim Plunkett was 30 years old, a former Heisman Trophy winner and first overall pick, and his NFL career appeared to be over. But in 1978, the Oakland Raiders signed him as a free agent backup quarterback. Nobody expected anything from this signing. Plunkett was damaged goods, a quarterback whose body had been broken by bad teams and worse offensive lines. He was insurance, a veteran presence who could hold a clipboard and mentor younger players. For 2 years, that is exactly what Plunkett did. He backed up Ken Stabler in 1978. He backed up Dan Pastorini in 1979 and 1980, and then, 5 games into the 1980 season, Pastorini broke his leg. The Raiders turned to Jim Plunkett, 32 years old, written off by everyone except Al Davis. This was his last chance. Plunkett led the Raiders to an 11-5 record. They made the playoffs as a wild card team. Nobody gave them a chance to do anything meaningful in January. The Raiders proceeded to win 3 consecutive road playoff games. They beat the Houston Oilers in the wild card round. They beat the Cleveland Browns in the divisional round. They beat the San Diego Chargers in the AFC Championship. Super Bowl 15, Louisiana Superdome, New Orleans, Louisiana. Oakland Raiders versus Philadelphia Eagles, January 25th, 1981. The Eagles had the best defense in football. They had demolished opponents all season. They were favored to win the championship. Jim Plunkett destroyed them. He completed 13 of 21 passes for 261 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was named Super Bowl MVP. A quarterback who had been out of football 2 years earlier was now a champion and the best player on the biggest stage in sports. Final score, Oakland 27, Philadelphia 10. The Raiders were champions again, and Jim Plunkett had completed one of the greatest comeback stories in NFL history. But he was not finished. The Raiders moved to Los Angeles in 1982. They missed the playoffs that season as Plunkett dealt with injuries. In 1983, he shared starting duties with Mark Wilson as the team went 12-4 and returned to the playoffs. Super Bowl 18, Tampa Stadium, Tampa, Florida. Los Angeles Raiders versus Washington Redskins, January 22, 1984. The Redskins were defending Super Bowl champions. They had one of the most powerful offenses in NFL history. They were heavily favored. The Raiders destroyed them in one of the most dominant Super Bowl performances ever. Jim Plunkett was efficient and mistake-free. He completed 16 of 25 passes for 172 yards and 1 touchdown. But the story was the Raiders' defense, which forced turnovers and completely shut down Washington's attack. Final score, Los Angeles 38, Washington 9. Jim Plunkett had his 2nd Super Bowl ring. He had led the Raiders to 2 championships in 4 years. He had gone from forgotten to immortal. Plunkett played 3 more seasons before retiring after the 1986 campaign. He finished his career with 2 Super Bowl victories and 2 Super Bowl MVP awards, and he is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Let me repeat that because it is one of the great injustices in professional sports. Jim Plunkett, a 2-time Super Bowl champion and 2-time Super Bowl MVP, is not in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame voters have ignored him for decades. They claim his regular season statistics are not good enough. They point to the years he spent on bad teams early in his career. They dismiss his championships as products of great defenses rather than great quarterbacking. This is nonsense. Plunkett's story is one of the most remarkable in football history. From Heisman Trophy winner to forgotten backup to 2-time Super Bowl MVP. No quarterback has overcome more or achieved more with less support earlier in his career. The Hall of Fame's refusal to induct him is indefensible, and it represents a bias against Raiders players that has existed for decades. Now let me connect these 2 quarterbacks and show you what they represent. Ken Stabler and Jim Plunkett were both second-chance players. Both had been written off. Both found redemption in Oakland. Both delivered championships when it mattered most. This is the Raiders' identity, the franchise that believes in players when everyone else has stopped believing. the organization that gives opportunities to those who have been discarded. Stabler was suspended and could have been cut. Al Davis kept him. Plunkett was out of football and could have stayed retired. Al Davis signed him. Both decisions were criticized at the time. Both decisions led directly to Super Bowl victories. This is what separates the Raiders from every other franchise. They do not just recycle the same conservative decisions that other teams make. They take risks on players with complicated pasts because they understand that talent matters more than reputation. Sometimes those risks fail spectacularly, but sometimes they produce Hall of Fame careers and championship banners. Ken Stabler led the Raiders to one Super Bowl victory in 1977. Jim Plunkett led them to two more in 1981 and 1984. 3 championships in 8 years. A dynasty built on quarterbacks who were given second chances. These are the men who took the Raiders to the Super Bowl. These are the players who defined what it means to be silver and black. These are the champions whose legacies will never be forgotten. If you are a Raiders fan, you already know these stories. But if you are new to the franchise, if you are trying to understand what makes this organization different, study Ken Stabler and Jim Plunkett. Study how they overcame rejection. Study how they performed under pressure. Study how they delivered when championships were on the line. That is Raiders football. That is the standard. That is what every quarterback who wears silver and black will be measured against. Subscribe to this channel if you want more Raiders history told honestly and completely. We do not just celebrate the wins, we honor the journeys that made those wins possible. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that the Raiders' 3 Super Bowl victories were not accidents. They were earned by quarterbacks who refused to quit when the world had quit on them. Comment below with your favorite Ken Stabler or Jim Plunkett moment. Tell me which championship means the most to you. Tell me if you believe Plunkett belongs in the Hall of Fame. The silver and black has produced many great players, but only 2 quarterbacks have led this franchise to Super Bowl victories. Ken Stabler, 1 championship, 1 MVP season, 1 Hall of Fame career built on redemption. Jim Plunkett, 2 championships, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 1 story that proves anything is possible if you refuse to surrender. These are the quarterbacks who took the Raiders to the Super Bowl. These are the legends who made the impossible real. Just win, baby. That is what they did. That is what they will always be remembered for. And that is why their names will live forever in Raiders history.